life to me, you and me.
Since 1998, the American Groundwater Trust has convened over 20 conference sessions with a focus on aquifer recharge. The Trust's 2009 conference in Orlando, Florida, brought together 200 aquifer managers, scientists, engineers, and regulators from throughout the US and overseas. The conference presentations provided regional updates on aquifer recharge projects and discussed regulatory perspectives on the implementation of aquifer recharge projects. ASR, Aquifer Storage Recovery, is one of several different technologies that use engineering strategies to increase recharge to aquifers. The basic concept is to store water in the subsurface for later use in order to balance the timing of supply and demand. ASR uses wells to add water to aquifers and then later recovers the water from the same wells. Aquifer recharge can also be achieved by using infiltration ponds or by routing river flow to areas with natural recharge capabilities. Aquifer recharge is also referred to as MAR, Managed Aquifer Recharge, and as AR, Artificial Recharge. Water used for ASR is treated to drinking water standards prior to recharge into the aquifer. Water for ASR can come from a variety of sources, such as rivers, especially at high flow events, from water stored in reservoirs, from reuse of water treated to potable standards, and from desalination. Direct and rapid stormwater recharge to aquifers can occur naturally in areas throughout the country, such as seen in this image of water flowing into a sinkhole. During the Orlando conference, many presenters emphasized the economic and environmental benefits of using ASR technology.
People believe that when they turn on the faucet, the water will come. So it's not an issue. It's not a problem for them, you know. I keep saying we're never going to run out of water, but we're sure going to run out of cheap water. I mean, it's too undervalued right now.
Well, it's certainly very clear that we have a lot of stresses on our water supply. Demands have keep increasing. The water supply is not getting any more plentiful. And so we need to look at alternative ways of managing our water. And it makes so much sense to be able to put water underground for temporary storage and to be able to use it.
I attended one of these conferences a couple of years ago and learned of some of the problems. What I've found particularly interesting in this one is we're no longer talking about those problems, but we're talking about how those problems have been solved. We have learned a great deal over the last decade on what's possible and what's working. Obviously, there are a lot of functioning systems around the country and around the world, and certainly this has to be considered as one of the tools in our toolbox. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a scientist. I'm part of that public that tries to evaluate the best I can the information that's made available to us.
We're trying to capture and store our high winter flows because everything else is fully allocated at this point in time. So far, to date, we've been able to increase our base stream flows and improve our declining aquifers using ASRs. They're finding that we have less environmental impacts this way. They're less vulnerable to contamination. They use less land than a reservoir, and they seem to be lower to develop in terms of cost.
The primary driver for ASR is the economics. It's a very cost-effective water storage alternative. And so where water managers and utilities have decided to incorporate ASR into their portfolio of water supply options, they've been able to save tremendous sums of money, quite often hundreds of millions of dollars.
It's so much more cost effective than building these huge above ground storage tanks.
If you're interested in economics and you want to get water into the ground, if you can do it through surface basins, infiltration galleries, upstream ponds and so forth, that is clearly the least cost way to go. And so I just say that unequivocally, that's the way to go if you can do it. But there's lots of places that do not have the suitable hydrogeology. Marginal cost of producing another 1,000 gallons of water in the winter months for most utilities is very low. It's power, chemicals, residuals, disposal, maybe 15 cents to 35 cents per 1,000 gallons is the typical range we've seen. Now, what's the marginal value of that water when you recover it during a drought to meet a peak demand? Well, if you don't have enough water and you've got to go out and build more facilities, what are you going to spend? You're going to spend at least $4 per gallon per day capacity for most of these sites. So that spread is huge.
The 100,000 acre feet of water brought in to provide additional irrigation water is predicted to generate an additional $200 million in total business activity in the area, resulting in 1,200 additional jobs and $3 million increase every year in state tax revenues.
Direct produce sales out of Ventura County are something like $1.3 billion per year. When you add in all the support services and things that go along with it, it's a fairly significant economic driver in this part. We've lowered the water levels in the aquifers to such a degree that we've depressurized the confining units and we're getting connate waters released into the aquifers. Okay? We now have, as of 6 months ago, upward migration of oil field brines coming into some wells. Okay? So we're overstressing the system. We're overstressing the system. And our role is to try to conserve that, to try to get that system back in balance.
So the benefits, we maximize the use of available water supplies, rainwater, imported water when it's available. We maximize the use of basin storage. We have a much larger operating range than we would have otherwise. Provide insurance against droughts. Prevent seawater intrusion. We have a large seawater intrusion barrier.
We have a very seasonal supply. Being a headwater state, we're very close to the source. And water occurs in large amounts during 3 or 4 months during the year. And during the rest of the year, it's simply not available at near the magnitude. So between that and the need for reusing water that can be reused instead of letting it go out of the state, those two things combine to make ASR really an important solution and strategy for water use in Colorado.
People in the Southern California area are focusing on recycled water and stormwater recharge and recharging recycled water into their basins. So groundwater storage and recharge is a very important component.
One of the many tools that we're looking at in terms of better meeting those demands is to look at aquifer storage and recovery, taking excess winter water from the Russian River when it's available, and storing it in our groundwater basins for use in the summertime.
It's such a versatile technology. It can be applied in so many different ways for storing water, for storing heat, for meeting droughts and emergencies and seasonal and long-term demands.
Several United States ASR facilities have been in continuous operation for over 40 years. Currently, there are well over 100 ASR facilities in use, principally in the Mid-Atlantic, the Northwest, Arizona, California, Nevada, Texas, and Florida.
Now let's start with taking a look at just a few examples. Again, this is a very limited selection of projects in the Southwest. And what I'm trying to do here is give you an idea of the range of projects. We have many that I would consider fully developed that have been operating for more than 10 years. So then there's several projects that are in what I'm calling kind of an early stage of development. They've been operating, they're actually operating, at least recharging water, and for almost 5 years, or as much as 5 years. Many of these projects are not yet fully permitted. They're still working out their permitting issues. Then there's newborn projects, and I'm considering a newborn project something they've got funding, they're planning perhaps for construction, and they've begun the permitting phase of the project, but they haven't yet started operating. Then the last category is what I'm calling nascent projects. These are people that are planning and dreaming of implementing a recharge project one day. A lot of these people, I think, are in the wait and see mode. They're watching the projects that are going on right now. They're trying to see how much does it cost and let's see what we can learn from the other people that have implemented these projects. And then they're also trying to see how the regulations or what the regulatory environment is like, and if it is conducive to these projects or if it will throw a wrench in their plans, so to speak.
Florida has a very diverse artificial recharge history here in the state. We've got drainage wells right here in Orlando. We have rapid infiltration basins, or RIBs, that we use to, in many cases, get rid of some of our treated wastewater here in the state. We also rely on deep well injection. It is a part of recharge. It's usually down into saltwater aquifers. Obviously, it's largely viewed out as a waste of water, and we're trying to wean ourselves from the injection well programs that we've put in and make a better beneficial use of that water. We are all obviously expanding our ASR applications here in the state, taking the raw water from land surface and putting it down. Obviously, this is the most cost-effective storage option here. It requires minimal treatment. Give that surface water a chance to sit underground for a little while. The microbiology takes care of itself.
As a whole, owners and operators, clients express satisfaction and would be willing to expand their ASR systems or be willing to recommend it to others.
But we have not seen any adverse effects at all with the alluvial environment that we have in California. And the water quality at compliance wells down gradient have met all drinking water standards and notification level.
I work with the Division of Water Resource. Our mission is to plan, conserve, develop, and protect water resources. We promote ASR. Our role is to provide for future supply, and we are using existing water rights, and the physical water is available. Not one even investigatory thing found that there was any inhibition from water rights. They had them already, and the physical water was present and available for the project. And unlike you Floridians, gosh, we've had no metals mobilization, no environmental issues. In fact, I'll talk about how we've cleaned up some of the waters.
Virtually all of the presenters at the Orlando conference emphasized the importance of recognizing the integrated nature of the hydrologic system. The conjunctive use of surface water and groundwater enables water managers to seasonally maximize economic and environmental benefits of a more dependable supply. Finding seasonally available, natural supplies of source water for recharge can be more of a challenge than deciding on the technical issues of storage and recovery. For many areas, the reuse of water, shower to flower, represents a reliable recharge source with advanced treatment technology producing high-quality water.
We've recognised that we need to manage all of our water resources conjunctively. That includes stormwater, recycled wastewater, and our normal potable water supplies, both from our reservoirs in the hills and also from our traditional sources in terms of the River Murray.
We'll see ASR matched up with a whole bunch of other technologies to make all of them more effective and provide us with sustainable, reliable water supplies. And in the process, by storing water underground, we'll conserve a lot of water, because when we store it above ground, we lose a lot of it to evaporation and transpiration.
The Peace River, it used to be a spring-fed river. It used to, there was a spring called Kissington Springs that used to flow 25 million gallons of water a day. That spring went dry in 1950 and has not flowed since due to the groundwater pumpage in that basin. That upper part of the Peace River used to be artesian flow year-round. It now disappears underground 6 months at a time.
There's no question that you have competing interests for the water that's available, and how much water is dedicated to environmental use for quality of life use, how much is for water supply, how much of it is available for ag. Those are competing, not necessarily compatible interests sometimes.
We are one of the big proponents in the region for the reuse of water. So there are two cities in our area that have very large water treatment plants going in. One has advanced treatment. As we like to say, the only thing coming out of that plant is hydrogen and oxygen. From our perspective, the only new water that we're going to be able to have is that recycled water from cities.
Well, some of the stumbling blocks are, for instance, in parts of the western states, we have requirements for putting water into the ground that require the quality be far better than the water that we drink. So the water is good enough to drink, but not good enough to store underground. And that doesn't make sense. The standards that are being applied are even tighter than ambient groundwater quality in the aquifer in those areas. So we'll get past that, but in the process, in the time that we're sitting here stewing on this issue, opportunities are being lost for storing water underground. And certainly in the western states, the declining snowpack is a significant issue. That is the biggest storage mechanism we have, and as the climate change affects the snowpack, we'll be more and more dependent upon capturing rainfall when it occurs and getting it treated and into storage.
Operational experience with ASR projects is providing solutions to a variety of issues. For example, the mobilization of metals that may be naturally present in the aquifer, such as arsenic, the degradation of disinfection byproducts, and the attenuation of microorganisms in recharged aquifers.
We have 5 major water suppliers that supply about 90% of the citizens of our state. 2 of them have mature and fully operational projects. 2 of the 2 additional have pilot programs, either 2 or 4 years, and the 1 remaining is investigating it. Washington County has the distinction of being the fastest growing county in the United States of America. They use the Virgin River as recharge water source. They have an off-stream reservoir which is on sandstone bedrock. It's a 50,000 acre-foot capacity. They have 12 production wells around the reservoir that are all connected with an 18-inch pipe. They have recharged 70,000 acre-feet with no withdrawals yet because they're storing it for future demand, and it's part of their whole plan. It's a bridge for their increasing population until the Lake Powell pipeline is being built. Again, as part of their a long-term supply, they anticipate more wells and pipelines.
As you know, injected water with a high dissolved oxygen level is causing arsenic to leach out of the pyrite and migrate with the flow of groundwater in the ASR zones. That's it in a nutshell.
The take-home message from here is solute transport is important, advection is important. We are transporting and expanding our oxidized condition out in this 5 MGD site as far or farther than 350 feet away from the ASR well. This is my favorite because it's the redox. It's really the control on our metals mobility in the aquifer. And it's been the holy grail for us to try and understand when we are introducing oxygenated surface water into the aquifer, what happens to the redox environment, because it controls a lot of different chemical processes that are ongoing. It tells us that that response to the system is very rapid in that switch as we go from oxygenated conditions to reducing conditions. It happens over 2 days.
And then pumping, which is up to 350,000 acre feet per year. So about 75% of what people pump out, we put in every year. So it's a huge put and take operation. So if we weren't doing all this recharge, pumping would be severely curtailed.
Every location is site specific. So if you just go out and say, well, I can make ASR work at site X, it doesn't automatically mean it'll work at site Y. And you just have to be careful. You have to manage it. You just can't go in and do it without having a database. We stress monitoring, we stress planning to make sure you can go from start to finish and use best management practices.
And stormwater harvesting is seen as one of our few opportunities to get new water into the system. As population increases, as the urban centres increase, we get much more runoff, so that gives us an opportunity to capture much more water. And if we can capture and harvest that new water, then that goes a long, long way to providing for our water requirements into the future. So really we see this as being a significant component of our overall water supply into the future. In managed aquifer recharge, currently in South Australia we've got something in the order of about 25 to 30 active MAR sites operational. Most of them are harvesting stormwater from the
We're a district that was formed back in 1927 specifically to manage the groundwater resources in 7 basins that were facing severe overdraft conditions. So we've got our hands in a lot of issues dealing with aquifer management now. We started back in 1927 literally with horse-drawn plows and things in the river, building diversion structures to move the water out into the areas where we had infiltration ponds constructed. Most of our recharge activities occur as off-river recharge. So we have a large series of infiltration basins that we've constructed. We're now using that water that we're recharging to help us control seawater intrusion in some areas.
Presenters spoke about the importance of a level playing field for handling regulatory and permit issues related to ASR. Water managers need to have a high degree of regulatory certainty before investing private or public capital in long-term strategic plans involving aquifer storage. Regulatory uncertainties result from considerable state-by-state variability about which agencies have jurisdictional responsibility for aquifer storage, with water right issues playing a dominant role in some states. There is a need to revisit and update aquifer recharge regulations from a water resource perspective. Regulatory changes should separate ASR from rules that manage industrial pollution and should accommodate risk-benefit based decision-making and allow for a period of aquifer conditioning during operation of ASR facilities.
So for us, ASR, the administrative process, is really an exercise in coordination and interagency collaboration. Well, direct injection treated rainwater for domestic wells can be allowed by DEQ alone at this point in time. The direct injection of treated municipal wastewater and industrial wastewater is specifically prohibited by our rules. Treated drinking water is the only source water we can allow at this point in time under our rules for direct injection. Because in the state of Oregon, under groundwater regulations, all aquifers statewide qualify as potential drinking water sources.
The reason we didn't go forward with ASR legislation was because people were confusing it with deep well injection. And so the governor got very scared that, people are going to be looking at ASRs as, well, that's where they put all the wastewater, and nothing could be further from the truth.
On the regulatory side, there are a lot of regulations involved, obviously. The agencies involved are Water Resources Department, Department of Environmental Quality, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Division of Health Services. And each of these regulate certain aspect of the overall aquifer storage. In Oregon, the process is led by the Water Resources Department, and by law, they must consult with the other agencies and have to get their buy-in and buy-off on permitting of all these processes.
What are some of the regulatory and big issues that we're wrestling with? Number one, we've got an unreliable supply from our state water project.
We're seeing a lot of pressure being put on our water supplies for ecological uses, maintenance of estuaries. Our district in particular is wrestling with the reestablishment of steelhead trout in the river that we divert from. And we're having very stringent water use restrictions being placed upon us that are going to impact our ability in the future to serve customers and deal with the overdraft and seawater intrusion issues that we're wrestling with right now. So we oftentimes get conflicting guidance, instructions, and requirements placed upon us by various agencies. So it's a constant juggling act to make sure you're in compliance with.
Why are we disinfecting this if it would be disinfected naturally down in the ground? I think we have a commitment here as a professional organization to look hard. Are we really wisely using power and chemicals and other things? This question's being asked more and more, not only from, hey, let's keep as small of carbon footprint as we can, but also folks are, they're being squeezed these days. There's less and less money, discretional funds to be thrown at these projects.
Now, the regulatory dilemma. From section 1421, parentheses D, parentheses 2, from the Safe Drinking Water Act. It says, underground injection. This pertains to underground injection only. Underground injection endangers drinking water sources if such injection may result in the presence in the underground water which supplies or can reasonably be expected to supply any public water system of any contaminant, and if the presence of such contaminant may result in such systems not complying with any national primary drinking water standard, drinking water regulation, or may otherwise adversely affect the health of persons. This is often referred to as the endangerment clause, or the non-endangerment clause, as you prefer. If you have an injection operation, if you're not endangering a public water system, it's not in violation of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And DEP is very careful to protect other potential uses of the ASR aquifer. DEP would not permit an ASR project to go forward if we felt there was a risk to other persons or public water systems or even private water users. we would not permit that project to go forward. We are working with permittees in the water management districts and the EPA toward a more permanent regulatory solution. I believe every ASR system in our state meets the Safe Water Drinking Act.
EPA thinks ASR is best thing since sliced bread. I mean, it's something that should be developed. They want to encourage it. There's no history of any kind of damage to aquifers. And it's a great technology, but they also acknowledge that in many areas of the country, it is stalled. It's not moving forward when it should move forward. The elephant in the room, the one thing that we kept coming back to, was the interpretation and enforcement of the endangerment clause of the Safe Drinking Water Act is the primary driver for the EPA. That is the one issue they are concerned about. It drives everything they do with regard to ASR or any other type of underground injection control. It's how do you interpret, how do you enforce the Safe Drinking Water Act.
Aquifer storage and recovery is done in a way that does protect the public, primarily from a water rights standpoint. The water users on the river with senior water rights, with very old water rights, watch very closely to ensure that any pumping of groundwater is done in a way that is legal and will not cause injury to them. So when somebody recharges water into the aquifer for later pumping, they need to show that they've done the groundwater modeling and the accounting to show that the water they take out is water that they actually had put in at an earlier date. In terms of ASR, that means that we need to ensure that when people recharge water into the different aquifers, that they have the right to that water. And similarly, when they pump it out, that it's water that they actually recharged into the system.
When we first started out in probably 92, 93 in terms of larger scale ASR schemes, the regulatory framework was very, very cautious. And through that body build-up of scientific information and knowledge, the regulatory framework has now actually been relaxed a little bit to allow us to move forward quite freely with ASR.
Yes, there's more information required. What we're finding is in the state, the regulatory agencies aren't really trained and prepared to manage water resources, and the regulatory agencies are used to managing water quality problems and trying to fix pollution problems. And so from a training and educational standpoint, understanding the value of water, being able to weigh the benefits of increased water quantity and water supply reliability is very important, and they're not prepared to do that. Water managers, water providers need to have certainty to do capital projects. With the current regulatory environment, it's uncertain. And until we find some solutions, we won't be able to provide the projects we need.
At this time, we do not have any regulatory impediments to it. We have a Recharge and Recovery Act. We also have another act that administered groundwater management areas, which the regulatory environment, again, it's neither promoting nor adverse. It simply administers the regulations that protect our natural resources and still provide for a water supply.
One of our recommendations was to have a national expert type panel that could help manage this and give more consistent regulations across the U.S.
The Orlando Conference and other similar professional meetings have provided effective information exchange opportunities for aquifer storage experts and practitioners. Many advancements in technology have arisen as a result of these exchanges. There has been extensive ASR research completed nationally and internationally within the past decade, which support the continued and increased use of ASR concurrent with regulatory change. There has been a collective learning curve on matters such as the science and technology of well design, water quality effects resulting from storage, pre-recharge treatment technology, and operational guidelines to maximize recovery.
The public perception, I think, we all need to do a little more work on. I think the public understands well the terms wastes, pollutants, and disposal, and I think that's one of our problems. And some, I think, view recharge water as pollution.
So I think as a body right here, education would be the key to getting ASR moving forward.
We definitely, as a society, we're willing to accept taking a treated effluent, putting it into a river, and then downstream, people are taking that river water and treating it for drinking. And so we really are recycling our water that way. In essence, it's an indirect potable reuse. And ASR, in many ways, has a lot of similarities, and you're actually using better water quality many times, and yet we have a reluctance when it goes in the ground when we pull it back out. So we really are trying to look at the benefits of these projects just clearly outweigh the risk.
But many utilities that fail to gain acceptance for the recycled water, the toilet to tap and yuck factor, all those things that we're all aware of. But I think changing condition, drought, climate change, cost of water is really changing attitudes. You know, there are cities in Australia that have said if we don't go to direct potable reuse, we're going to cease to exist.
It all comes down to the risk versus benefit. We need to get ASR into a mainstream. If we can make reclaimed water, reuse mainstream, we can make ASR mainstream. So we need to work harder to get ASR on the radar of the people that make decisions.
When we started, we said that this process has to be very transparent. No occult, no secrecy, nothing of that sort had to be there. We had 12 meetings in the 14 months, and everyone was fully attended. A lot of kudos go to the people involved that they were willing to do that, and they had the foresight to know that at the end of this rainbow, there is a little bit of a goal for everyone to share. Technical memoranda were all published on a project website, and the importance of that is we didn't wait for one big report at the end. We wanted to give them a chance to look at standalone sections of this as we went along and get their input along the way.
We have a tremendous body of knowledge, of reports, and we have just to quietly and as forthrightly as we can get that information in front of the decision makers, in front of the environmental groups, in front of anyone who will listen. And we're finding, I think we're going to find that as budgets get tighter and tighter, that people will be more and more open to proven, viable, cost-effective alternatives and less inclined to listen to a lot of the misinformation that's been publicized.
We need to reach some consistency for all these projects. The people that are developing the projects need to have some certainty in what the outcome is going to be. People don't want to invest millions of dollars and be wondering the whole time if they'll ever get a permit.
In the US and throughout the world, there is rising population, increasing demands for water for industry, agriculture, utility supply, and a need to commit water resources to sustain environmental and ecological needs. When the likely effects of climatic change are factored into water resources planning, then including and adding aquifer storage capability will become of increasing importance as a water management strategy.
From the Southwest Water Management District's point of view, we're looking at 3 different ways of possibly coming up with the ASR solution in our district. The first is, again, looking at operational strategies, that creating the buffer zone or that conditioning the aquifer. The second we're looking at is, again, deoxygenation of the inject water. And lastly, what the purpose of this meeting and other similar meetings is the regulatory constraints both at a state and federal level. So I know as one of the 5 water, one of the 5 water management districts in Florida, we are focused on this with laser vision. This is a critical initiative in our district. We have a lot of things going, and as far as I'm personally concerned, this is one of our #1 priorities to try to resolve, not over the coming decade, but over the coming months or year or two.
We'll continue to see more ASR in Colorado. Right now, as people become better able to use groundwater modeling and conjunctive use systems where surface water storage, groundwater storage, and different sources of groundwater and surface water flowing live all come together in a way that they are used in an optimal way at the optimal time to get the most out of the water resource. Our understanding of that is improving over time, and it will only lead to more success in ASR.
And we're looking at aquifer storage treatment and recovery, whereby you inject in a single well, and then some 50 metres or 100 metres distance, you actually then recover the water from a second well. So we're actually looking at the aquifer playing quite a vital role in the improvement of water quality. The aquifer being a treatment process, it's going to have tremendous opportunities in some of the third world countries, emerging countries. We don't need to worry about putting on extensive treatment processes, RO, desalination, large, complicated technical things that may not have and fairly energy intensive that a lot of the third world countries won't be able to support in the longer term. So things like ASTR provides an opportunity for all communities, particularly in some of these developing nations, to get access to good quality water supplies.
I think we're going to see managed aquifer recharge increase with time in the state of Utah. It's simply a mature technology. It's a cost-effective technology. It's not the end-all and do-all, but it's certainly a valuable tool in the kit of water suppliers.
We've dealt with and pretty much overcoming a lot of the technical issues, but getting the regulatory framework to catch up with the science and the technology is kind of the leading edge of ASR in many parts of the country and also at the federal level. So I'm optimistic that we'll get there. There's been tremendous advances in the last few months and years. So I think we will get there, and we'll have a regulatory framework that matches up with the science and the technology. We're not quite there yet. We have stumbling blocks in certain areas with certain issues, but I'm confident that we will in fact get there.
We knew from the outset that this was a win-win situation. Just looking at the benefits and the beneficiaries, you'd say, you know, what's there for people not to like?
ASR is a successful water management technology and is supported by an enormous amount of research and case studies, especially within the last decade. Secondly, issues related to changes in water quality as a result of ASR operations still require continued monitoring and attention to continue to improve the application and transfer of ASR technology. Thirdly, ASR is vital to the future of America's water supply and management to accommodate increasing water demands from population growth and environmental needs. Fourthly, regulatory change is needed to provide a greater degree of certainty for water managers to promote continued and increased use of ASR. Fifthly, regulatory change should separate ASR rules from industrial pollution rules, provide for risk-benefit-based decision-making, and allow sufficient time for aquifer conditioning to occur. Sixthly, public education is needed to provide objective and technically correct information about the benefits of using aquifer recharge technology to effectively manage water supply. And lastly, for links to aquifer recharge information and to organizations involved with ASR technology, visit the American Groundwater Trust website at www.agwt.org.
I walked down by the ocean. The salt spray gave me thirst, but I could not drink the water. That would only make things worse. Groundwater down under in the aquifer. Your cool, clean water gives life to me, you and me. Now the sun beats down till the sand is a furnace floor. You can see the heat waves shimmering on the shore. Water vaporizing high, clouds form in the sky. I swam in the cold lake water, fed by rivers, rains and snows, but I could not drink the water. Pollution made that so. Groundwater down under